This piece of board with the nails in it, just the nails, has been in my drawer for about 5 or 6 years. I used it originally with those nails at the top end and the brass wire wrapped round them to make these. That didn't turn out too well, simply because the wire I used came off a roll and wouldn't straighten out when I wrapped it round pins. So I've started trying to use straight bits of wire and discovered that what I knew all along and hadn't bothered to use really was worth doing, and that was taking a length of wire from the roll, stick it in the drill and the vise and give it a quick full speed blip, and bingo, it turns straight, lovely and rigid. I can't seem to get the whole length of it together at the same time, which is because it's bent and not straight and rigid and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to try and position parts of it in the right place so that I can then super glue them together in bits. A spray of water. Perhaps I've put too much water on. Perhaps it wasn't going to work anyway. Perhaps I'll Google what happens if you spray water on superglue. All these things are options. Well, that's got it glued together. It didn't move when I moved the... Well, what do you know? Yes, the superglue is running into the join. He says hopefully it won't glue it to the wood. We shall see. We shall see. Now we go away and wait a little while. Plus I've been doing this long enough this morning. I've just tried the brute force and super glue and baking soda. So I used the rods there to try. I'd finished gluing it, and when I picked it up, of course it's very fragile, and one of the ends sprang apart because it wasn't glued very well. So I've positioned it together again using these rods to try and force it into position, and run super glue into the join of the brace at the bottom there and put baking soda on it. So the hope is that that's going to be concrete, and when it's all gone off I can wash it and fit in the walkway, which I have yet to cut out of the brass mat that I think will do to make the walkway across the top, and then we'll think about the handrails and things. Has it become reasonably rigid? Yes, it has. I have just looked through some of the video clips that I made manufacturing various things, and I've seemed to have missed some bits out. Well, I know I've missed some bits out, so I've come back to sort of fill them in for you after the event. The wire mesh, brass mesh that I used to make the walkways and the platforms for the signals, I managed to cut with track cutters. I've glued on the mesh support just larger than the rails I've used to support it. So this I can then cut off, flush, And I'm also working on the handrails to go around those signal platforms, some of which I have finished. You can see this signal platform was a bit smaller. It's the first one I did, wrong size. I'm not going to take it off again. It'll just finish up being that size. I made a little tool in aluminium so that I can bend the handrail sections to the right size and shape. And I also made the legs for the gantries using this little bit of board with the nails in to hold the things in position whilst I glued them, so that it will finish up looking like that. Now, you heard me asking myself a little tentatively, where would I find some plasticard? Well, this is because the only plasticard I've got is these I-beams and L-beams and channels and things that I use to make the legs for my gantries. Haven't got any sheet plasticard, but I did have a couple of old used credit cards, and I've measured that at 2.5 millimeters wide, which is about that, and I'll just cut it to an approximate size, glue it in place. We'll use the other glue this time, applicable with a brush. I suppose we better weight it down first so that it doesn't move on me. And I could put my headband magnifier on so that I can see what I'm doing. Now then, put some glue on the ends. Now we just have to try not to touch that whilst I'm applying it. There we go. Let that go off now, and then see if I can handle it without it falling to bits. I don't know how much of that we got on screen, so I'll try it again. I just fit one end of my wire in the vise, the other end of my wire in the chuck of my drill, and the wire itself needs to come out of the chuck in the centre, or else it wobbles backwards and forwards as it's spinning and breaks off. But of course, if you put the wire down the centre of the chuck, it doesn't grip because there's that small gap in the middle of the chuck faces. Gradual tension. That's better. How much twist? It's hard to know, it's very subjective. If I do this long enough, I suppose I'll figure out which works and which doesn't work. I placed the pins to space the two horizontal rails. I think I perhaps could have got them a bit further apart, but never mind. All the way across, both sides round both gantries. And then I've laid these short pieces over the top of the lower one and under the top one, having spaced the wires a 2mm thick card over the board that I'm working on. Hopefully this will allow me to get all the legs the right length, in the hope that I can mount it in a straight line on the top of the gantry. I'm having to do this standing up with one arm each side of the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. Well, I've cut the far end off and I'm just ready to cut this end off, and it seems to be staying relatively straight. So my twisted wires to force these wires that had come off rolls to be straight seems to have worked. There we go. Now the next task is to see if I can bend these short sections which are supposed to be above the signal frames into a half round section that will allow the access to the ladder. I'll give this a go. More handrails for my gantry. Bending the straight handrails that I made didn't work. I was trying to make hoops for the maintenance engineers to access the ladders to the gantry. That didn't work. So I've tried just putting a straight fence across there and fitting a hoop separately, which I think is going to work. But I have to make some more fencing, make some more handrail first. And I discovered, I was going to say much to my dismay, but hey, it doesn't really matter. I discovered that blue tack or white tack doesn't stick to chipboard when it's dusty and dry. So I had to take these pieces up again, and I'm just going to relay them after having put a row of sellotape down on the board to hold it in place. I've got 25 here in total to make the straight barrier for the signal side with the maintenance worker access for the ladders that I will perhaps later cut out of the straight section and fit a loop to allow access to the ladders, which is what I've done on this one. Whether you can see it or not, I don't know. There's just a single hoop there. I think I'm going to put the hoop on the second one as well, on the top layer. It's sort of assuming here that the maintenance worker will duck under the top one and get behind the hoop, but I think perhaps it would be better with two hoops. We shall see. Come back next week.
is the 1470 London 11 coaches. When passengers intending to travel on this service, please join the train now and is ready to leave. Platform 3 from the 1420 Virgin train service to Manchester Piccadilly, which is ready to leave. From the 1423 Virgin train service to Birmingham